The early morning mist hung low over the vast Montana wilderness, casting a ghostly veil over the towering pines. The first light of dawn filtered through the branches, illuminating the frost-covered ground. A sharp bark cut through the silence. A German shepherd stood at the edge of a clearing, his ears pricked forward, his amber eyes scanning the dense woods with an intensity that spoke of years of training. This was Max, a highly skilled search and rescue dog, known across the county for his sharp instincts and unwavering loyalty. Beside him stood Ethan Blake, a 35-year-old rescue officer with rugged features and eyes that held the weight of experience. His dark hair was flecked with a few strands of gray, a testament to the years spent in this demanding profession. He had seen countless search missions, each one more difficult than the last, but there was one constant in his life: Max. The two were more than just a team. They were partners, bound by a trust that had been forged through life-or-death situations. Ethan crouched down, running his gloved fingers through Max's thick coat. "Ready for another day, buddy," he murmured, feeling the steady thump of Max's tail against his leg. The dog responded with a sharp nod, his gaze never leaving the trees ahead. The morning air was crisp, biting against Ethan's skin, but he had learned to embrace the elements. There was no room for comfort in this line of work. Max had been trained since he was a pup, molded into a perfect search and rescue dog through years of rigorous training. He could detect human scent from miles away, track the faintest footprints, and navigate treacherous terrain with an agility that even experienced hikers lacked. He was not just any dog. He was the best at what he did. Their last mission had been a grueling one. A lost hiker had gone missing deep in the mountains, her footprints disappearing beneath heavy snowfall. The search team had struggled against time and weather, but it was Max who had led them straight to her. The woman had been unconscious, buried beneath a mound of snow, barely alive. If not for Max, she would have never made it through the night. Ethan often wondered if Max understood the magnitude of his work. Did he know how many lives he had saved? Did he feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders? But every time he looked into those intelligent eyes, he saw only focus, determination, and an unbreakable bond. As Ethan straightened, he glanced toward the station. Today would be like any other day, or so he thought. He had no idea that within hours, they would be racing against time, battling nature's fury, and fighting for the life of a small boy lost in the heart of the frozen wilderness. Max exhaled a sharp breath, his ears twitching as if sensing what lay ahead. "Come on, boy," Ethan said, gripping the leash loosely. "Let's get to work." Max didn't need to be told twice. With a burst of energy, he bounded forward, ready for whatever the day had in store. The wind howled through the Montana wilderness, rattling the windows of the search and rescue station where Ethan and Max had just finished their evening rounds. The storm had rolled in faster than expected, turning the once clear sky into a swirling mass of dark clouds. Heavy snowflakes drifted down, covering the ground in a thick, unforgiving blanket. Inside the station, Ethan sat at his desk, rubbing his tired eyes. Max lay curled up near his feet, ears twitching at every distant sound. The room was quiet except for the occasional crackle of the radio and the hum of the old heater struggling against the cold. Ethan reached for his coffee, but before he could take a sip, the emergency line rang, its shrill tone cutting through the stillness. His pulse quickened. Calls at this hour were never good news. "Blake here," he answered, grabbing a notepad. A panicked voice came through the line. "My son, he's missing." A woman's voice, trembling, breathless. "He ran off into the woods. We've been searching for hours, but we can't find him." Ethan immediately straightened, his grip tightening on the phone. "Ma'am, slow down. What's your name?" "Sarah Carter." "My son's name is Liam. He's only 5. Please, you have to find him." Ethan's stomach dropped. A child. 5 years old. Alone in the storm. Where was he last seen? He asked, already motioning for Max to get up. The dog lifted his head, sensing the urgency in Ethan's voice. "Behind our cabin near Pine Hollow. We were outside, and he just ran off. We thought he was playing, but then he didn't come back." my husband and I searched everywhere. We called his name, but the storm, her voice broke into a sob. Ethan had heard enough. He grabbed his gear and whistled for Max, who was already on his feet, fully alert. Stay by the phone. We're on our way. The moment he hung up, Ethan turned to the station's lead dispatcher. Get a team together. We need every available unit at Pine Hollow now. The dispatcher nodded, already making calls. Ethan threw on his heavy coat, adjusting his radio as he stepped outside. The wind hit him like a wall of ice, but he barely noticed. Max trotted beside him, his breath visible in the freezing air. He could sense the tension, the importance of the mission. This wasn't just another rescue. A child's life was on the line. As Ethan climbed into his truck, he glanced at Max. We've got a long night ahead, buddy. Max let out a short, determined bark. He was ready. With the snow thickening and visibility dropping, they sped into the storm, racing against time. Somewhere out there, a small boy was fighting against the cold, waiting to be found. And Max would find him. The truck's headlights barely cut through the swirling snow as Ethan navigated the treacherous road toward Pine Hollow. The storm had worsened in the past hour, and the once familiar landscape was now an endless expanse of white. His knuckles were tight against the steering wheel, his jaw clenched in focus. Every second counted. Max sat in the passenger seat, eyes locked on the road ahead. His ears flicked with anticipation, sensing the urgency in the air. Ethan had worked with him long enough to know that Max was already in rescue mode, his body tense, his instincts sharpening. As they neared the Carter family cabin, the radio crackled. Blake, come in. This is Unit 2. We're 5 minutes behind you. Ethan grabbed the radio. Copy that. I'm pulling up now. The parents are waiting. Let's move fast, the temperature is dropping hard. He turned into the snow-covered driveway, barely making out the cabin's porch light, which flickered like a dying ember in the night. 2 figures stood outside, bundled in thick coats. Ethan could hear the mother's sobs even before he stepped out of the truck. Sarah Carter ran toward him, her face streaked with frozen tears. Please. You have to find him. It's so cold, he's so little. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll find him, ma'am. I need details. Where exactly did he disappear? Her husband, David Carter, stepped forward, his face lined with panic. We were out back near the tree line. Liam was playing in the snow. I went inside for just a minute, and when I came back, he was gone. I called for him, but the wind, it's so loud out there. Ethan turned to Max, who stood at full attention, eyes sharp. He pulled Liam's small stuffed bear from Sarah's trembling hands and held it to Max's nose. Find him, boy. Max sniffed deeply, taking in the child's scent. Then, without hesitation, he took off toward the woods. Ethan and Max pushed into the dark forest, their boots crunching over freshly fallen snow. The wind howled through the trees, rattling branches and sending icy shards into their path. The storm had almost completely erased any visible footprints, but Max wasn't relying on sight. His nose was his guide. Behind them, 2 other rescue officers from Unit 2 arrived and fanned out in different directions. Their flashlights bobbed in the darkness as they combed through the storm. Ethan kept his eyes on Max, trusting the dog's instincts over everything else. Suddenly, Max stopped. His ears perked, and he let out a sharp whine. He had found something. Ethan rushed forward. The faint outline of small footprints was barely visible in the snow, leading deeper into the woods. Good boy, Max, keep going. Max followed the trail, sniffing urgently. They moved faster now, their breath coming out in misty puffs against the frozen air. The prints continued for about 30 yards, then suddenly disappeared. Ethan's stomach dropped. No, 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 he muttered, sweeping his flashlight in every direction. Max circled the area, sniffing furiously. His tail was stiff, his body language alert. Ethan knelt and examined the ground. The footprints didn't just fade, they ended abruptly. as if Liam had been lifted or had fallen. "What happened here?" he whispered. Then he saw it, broken branches above them, tangled together in an unnatural way. His eyes followed their path downward, and his chest tightened. Just a few feet ahead, barely visible beneath a cluster of low-hanging branches, was something small and red. Liam's scarf. Ethan lunged forward, yanking the scarf from the snow. It was still warm, meaning Liam had been there not too long ago. He turned to Max, holding it out. "Where is he, boy?" Max's nose worked overtime, sniffing the scarf before darting off toward the trees. Ethan followed, heart pounding. They emerged from the trees into a small clearing, where the snow was uneven. It looked like something, or someone, had tumbled down the slope. Ethan swallowed hard. His flashlight followed the uneven ground downward, toward a frozen stream at the bottom of the hill. "Oh no!" Max suddenly let out a low, desperate whine, pacing at the edge of the incline. He looked at Ethan, then back down. Ethan knew what that meant. Liam was down there. Gripping his radio, he barked into it, "Unit 2, I found tracks. I think the boy fell into the lower creek bed, moving down now." The wind howled in response, drowning out whatever reply might have come. Ethan didn't hesitate. He half slid, half ran down the snowy slope, Max beside him. His boots skidded on the ice, but he stayed upright, his focus locked on the stream. There, barely visible under a thin layer of ice, was a small shape curled up near the base of a tree. "Liam." Ethan rushed forward and dropped to his knees beside the boy. Liam's tiny body was covered in frost, his cheeks pale, his lips a sickening shade of blue. "Liam, can you hear me?" Ethan pressed his gloved fingers to the boy's neck. A pulse, faint, but there. Max nudged Liam's arm, whining softly. The dog curled around him, using his body heat to keep the child warm. Ethan grabbed his radio again. "I have him. He's alive, but he's freezing. We need extraction now." The storm roared overhead, and Ethan gritted his teeth. The team might take several more minutes to reach them. But Liam didn't have minutes to spare. He made a quick decision. Tearing off his own coat, Ethan wrapped it around Liam, then scooped him into his arms. "Max, stay close. We're moving." Max barked once, his eyes never leaving the boy. As Ethan climbed back up the slope, Liam stirred weakly, his voice barely a whisper. "Cold." Ethan's grip tightened. "I know, buddy. Just hold on. We're getting you home." The night was far from over, but one thing was certain, Liam had a chance. And they wouldn't stop until he was safe. The snowstorm showed no signs of easing as Ethan tightened his grip around Liam's small, frozen body. His breath came in rapid puffs, misting in the icy air. Every step up the slippery incline felt like a battle against the elements, but there was no time to think about exhaustion. Liam needed warmth, and he needed it fast. Max stayed close, his sharp eyes scanning their surroundings, ears twitching with every sound. His body pressed against Ethan's leg, steadying him as they climbed. The rescue team was still minutes away, and every second counted. As they reached the crest of the slope, Ethan readjusted Liam in his arms and whispered, "You're doing great, kid. Stay with me." A soft, barely audible whimper escaped Liam's lips. He was conscious, but barely. "We're almost there." Ethan's voice was firm, but deep down, his stomach was a knot of worry. The wind shrieked through the trees, kicking up blinding flurries of snow. Visibility was dropping fast. Ethan pulled Liam closer, shielding him as best as he could. The forest was becoming a frozen death trap. Suddenly, Max froze. His head snapped up, ears pinned forward. His entire body tensed. Ethan immediately stopped, his instincts on high alert. "Max? What is it?" The dog let out a deep, low growl. His breath was visible in the freezing air, his stance rigid. Then, a sound. A deep, throaty creaking noise, like ice straining under pressure. Ethan's eyes widened. "Oh, Hell! The ground beneath them was unstable. Ethan's boots sank deeper into the snow as the weight beneath him shifted unnaturally. They were standing on a hidden ice shelf. A thin layer of snow had concealed it, making it indistinguishable from solid ground. Max let out a sharp bark, circling Liam and Ethan, his warning clear. They had to move. Now. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. He adjusted Liam's weight and took a slow step forward. Crack. The sound split the air like a gunshot. The ground lurched beneath them. Ethan stumbled as the ice collapsed, sending chunks tumbling down into the unseen depths below. Move! Ethan roared, his adrenaline surging. He surged forward, gripping Liam tightly, just as the ice gave way behind them. Max leaped ahead, his powerful legs propelling him forward in time. A split second slower, and he would have vanished into the abyss. Ethan landed hard on his side, skidding through the thick snow, his body wrapped protectively around Liam. His shoulder slammed into a rock, sending pain shooting through his arm. He gasped, pushing through the agony. Liam? Hey, buddy, talk to me. Liam let out a soft, weak cough. His eyelids fluttered open, his breath shallow. Ethan exhaled in relief. Good. You're okay. Max trotted back toward them, sniffing anxiously at Liam's face before pressing his warm body against Ethan's side. His presence was an anchor, a reminder that they weren't alone in this battle against the wilderness. But they weren't safe yet. Ethan glanced behind them. The place where they had just been standing was gone, replaced by a gaping hole of darkness. A drop of at least 30 feet, leading into an ice-choked ravine. If Max hadn't sensed it in time. Ethan didn't want to think about it. All right, buddy. Let's get you out of here before something else decides to collapse. With renewed urgency, Ethan rose to his feet, his legs trembling slightly from the near fall. He pulled his radio from his vest, pressing the freezing metal against his lips. Unit 2, come in. Static. Ethan swore under his breath. The storm had likely interfered with the signal. He was on his own for now. He surveyed the area. The shortest route back to the cabin was now blocked by the collapsed ice shelf. They would have to take a longer, more dangerous route around the ravine. Max, lead the way. Max didn't hesitate. His paws moved swiftly over the uneven terrain, his instincts guiding him through the safest path. Ethan followed, holding Liam close. The storm was worsening, the wind whipping against them like 1,000 icy needles. Ethan's fingers were going numb, but he refused to loosen his grip on Liam. Almost there, kid. Just hang on. Then, another problem. Max stopped abruptly at the edge of a narrow ice bridge. It stretched over a deep crevasse, connecting their side of the ridge to the safer path beyond. The bridge was barely wide enough for a single person. Ethan's stomach twisted. Max tested the ice with his paw. It held, but just barely. Ethan inhaled sharply. We don't have a choice. He knelt, wrapping Liam tightly against his chest with his jacket before rising again. Max, go first. Max obeyed immediately, stepping lightly, his movements precise. He reached the other side safely and turned back, ears perked, waiting. Ethan adjusted Liam's weight, took one steady breath, and stepped onto the bridge. The ice creaked. He forced himself forward, step by agonizing step. The weight of both him and Liam made the bridge groan in protest. 2 more steps. 1 more. Then, a sickening snap. The bridge broke beneath them. For a split second, Ethan felt weightless. The icy wind rushed around them, the darkness below opening like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. And then, Max lunged forward, teeth latching onto Ethan's jacket. The force of Max's bite and pull was enough to stop their fall. Ethan's boots slammed against the edge of the cliff, his body dangling for a terrifying second before he scrambled up onto solid ground. His heart thundered, his breath coming in ragged gulps. Max stood over them, his body tense, his eyes burning with fierce determination. Ethan let out a breathless laugh. You really are something else, buddy. Liam stirred weakly against his chest. Doggy. Ethan's throat tightened. Yeah, kid. He's got you. Max licked Liam's cheek before sitting back, his tail thumping against the ice. Ethan pulled his radio free one more time. Unit 2, we need evac now. We're 5 minutes from the Carter cabin. The kid's alive, but we need warmth ASAP. This time, a crackling voice responded. Copy that, Blake. We've got eyes on your location. Hang tight. We're almost there. Ethan looked down at Liam, then at Max. They had made it through the worst. But the battle wasn't over yet. With a final nod, Ethan adjusted Liam's weight and started walking again, following Max through the storm, toward safety. Ethan's breath came in sharp gasps, his body burning with exhaustion as he trudged forward through the relentless storm. The weight of Liam in his arms felt heavier with every step, but he refused to slow down. The boy's life depended on it. Max stayed ahead of them, his paws pressing carefully against the snow-covered ground. His ears twitched with every gust of wind, his keen nose constantly working, ensuring that each step led them closer to safety. The search and rescue team was supposed to be close, but the storm wasn't letting up. Visibility was practically zero, and if they weren't careful, they could easily veer off course. Ethan tightened his grip around Liam, who was still barely conscious. His small body trembled against Ethan's chest, his breathing weak but steady. Hang in there, kid, Ethan muttered, pushing forward. Max suddenly stopped. His body stiffened, ears pricked forward. His breath came out in short, sharp bursts, his eyes locked on something in the distance. Ethan froze. What is it, buddy? Max let out a low, deep whine, his tail rigid behind him. Then, a sound. Faint at first. A rhythmic, almost mechanical hum, barely distinguishable beneath the howling wind. Engines. Vehicles. Ethan's heart leapt. Max, is that them? The dog let out a sharp bark, then suddenly took off, bounding through the snow with an urgency Ethan had seen many times before. He didn't hesitate. All right, buddy. I'm trusting you. Lead the way. He adjusted Liam's weight and followed Max, his boots crunching against the ice-packed ground. The wind made every step treacherous, but Max never wavered. His path was sure, his movements precise. He was tracking something. Then, through the storm, lights appeared. Headlights. A burst of relief surged through Ethan's chest. Over here, he shouted into the wind, waving an arm as he half ran, half stumbled toward the approaching rescue vehicles. Max reached them first, barking wildly. The search and rescue officers poured out of their trucks, rushing toward Ethan and Liam. One of them, a paramedic named Rachel, met him halfway. We've got you. How's the boy? Ethan carefully handed Liam over. He's alive, but he's freezing. We need to get him warm now. Rachel quickly checked Liam's vitals, her eyes serious. He's in the early stages of hypothermia. We need to move. Max jumped up, sniffing Liam's face before sitting back, watching intently as the medics wrapped him in thermal blankets. Ethan collapsed onto his knees, chest heaving. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving only exhaustion and gratitude. He turned to Max, who was sitting beside him, his tail thumping lightly against the snow. Ethan reached out, running a hand over the dog's damp fur. You did it, buddy. You saved him. Max simply licked Ethan's hand, then turned back to watch over Liam. The boy was safe. But the night wasn't over yet. The rescue team worked quickly, wrapping Liam in thermal blankets and placing heat packs near his chest and limbs. His breathing was shallow, his tiny hands barely moving beneath the layers. Ethan hovered over them, his heart pounding. Is he going to be okay? Rachel, the lead paramedic, nodded firmly. We got to him just in time. His body temperature is dangerously low, but he's still responsive. We need to get him into the heated truck immediately. The storm, however, had other plans. A sudden blast of wind howled through the trees, kicking up snow so thick that the rescue vehicles nearly disappeared from view. One of the officers, Mike, cursed under his breath. "We need to move fast. If we don't get out now, we might not get out at all." Ethan turned to Max, who was still standing guard beside Liam, his body tense, his ears flicking toward the roaring wind. He wasn't just watching, he was sensing something. Then, the ground rumbled beneath them. A deep, unsettling crack split through the howling wind. "What the hell was that?" one of the rescuers muttered. Ethan's blood ran cold. He knew that sound all too well. "Avalanche," someone shouted. Instantly, the team sprang into action. "Everyone back to the trucks. Move. Now." The mountain above them had been unstable for hours, and the combination of their movements, the storm, and the natural shifts in the snowpack had just triggered something deadly. The first roars of cascading ice and rock were distant, but they were getting closer. Ethan didn't think. He acted. "I'll carry Liam. Just get the path clear," he shouted. Max whipped around, barking sharply as if to push the rescuers forward. He darted ahead, his keen instincts telling him where to go. Ethan barely had time to lift Liam into his arms before the avalanche's thunderous roar grew deafening. The ground beneath them shook violently as the first wave of snow and ice crashed through the trees behind them. They were out of time. Mike threw open the door of the rescue truck. "Get him in. Get in now." Ethan barely managed to scramble inside as the avalanche slammed into the clearing, sending snow and debris tumbling around them. Max leaped in behind him, his fur coated in ice, just as Mike gunned the engine, the tires skidding wildly as they surged forward. For a few horrifying moments, all Ethan could hear was the deafening roar of nature's fury. Snow pounded against the windows, the vehicle lurched violently, and for a terrifying second, Ethan thought they were going to be buried alive. But then, silence. The truck broke through the blizzard, clearing the avalanche zone just as the final crash of snow and ice settled behind them. Ethan let out a shaky breath, his arms still tight around Liam. Rachel checked the boy's pulse. "He's okay. He's okay." Max, still standing alert despite everything, gave a soft, tired whine before pressing his head against Ethan's knee. Ethan ran a trembling hand through Max's fur. "You did good, buddy. You saved us again." And for the first time all night, Ethan allowed himself to believe it was finally over. The rescue truck rumbled forward, its tires crunching over the packed snow as it made its way back toward the Carter family's cabin. Inside, the heat was turned up high, filling the cabin with much-needed warmth. Ethan sat in the back seat, his arms still wrapped around Liam, who was now bundled tightly in layers of blankets. The little boy's breathing was steady but shallow, his small fingers twitching slightly as his body slowly fought against the cold. Rachel kept a close eye on Liam, checking his pulse every few minutes. "He's still in a hypothermic state, but we got to him in time. Once we reach the medics at the cabin, they'll get him stabilized before transferring him to the hospital." Ethan let out a deep breath, the weight of the night finally pressing down on him. He glanced toward Max, who was curled up beside him on the floor of the truck, his body rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. The German Shepherd had been relentless, leading them through the blizzard, warning them of danger, and ultimately saving all of their lives. Ethan reached down, running his fingers through Max's thick fur. "You did good, buddy," he murmured. Max let out a soft, content sigh, his ears twitching slightly but otherwise remaining still. He was exhausted, just like Ethan, but there was no doubt in Ethan's mind that, if needed, Max would be ready to jump into action again without hesitation. The road ahead was still treacherous, the storm raging outside, but the rescue team pressed on, determined to get Liam to safety. The radio crackled as the lead vehicle called in their status. "We're 15 minutes from the Carter cabin. The medical team is standing by." "Copy?" Mike, who was driving their truck, responded, "Copy that. Kid's stable for now, but he'll need immediate care when we arrive. ETA 15 minutes. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, exhaustion creeping in, but he refused to fully relax. Not until they had Liam safe in the hands of medical professionals. The cabin came into view, its porch lights glowing dimly through the heavy snowfall. As soon as the rescue trucks pulled in, a team of paramedics rushed forward, carrying medical bags and a stretcher. Sarah and David Carter burst out of the cabin, their faces lined with fear and desperation. The second Sarah spotted Liam in Ethan's arms, she let out a choked sob and ran toward them. "Oh my God! Liam!" Ethan carefully passed the boy into his mother's shaking hands. Sarah cradled him close, pressing tearful kisses to his cold forehead. David wrapped them both in his arms, his eyes brimming with gratitude and relief. "You found him," Sarah whispered, looking up at Ethan, her voice breaking. "You brought him back to us." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "Max found him. He's the real hero tonight." At the sound of his name, Max, despite his exhaustion, lifted his head slightly, his dark eyes watching the family reunion. David crouched down, reaching out to stroke Max's fur. "I don't even know how to thank you, boy. You saved my son. You saved all of us." Max let out a soft huff, his tail thumping weakly against the snow. The paramedics quickly got Liam onto the stretcher, checking his vitals as they prepared to transport him to the hospital. "He's going to be okay, but we need to get him warmed up properly and on 4 fluids," Rachel informed the parents. Sarah held onto Liam's small hand as they carried him toward the ambulance, never letting go. Ethan watched them, a deep sense of fulfillment settling in his chest. Liam was safe. The mission was a success. He looked down at Max, who was leaning against his leg, his body completely spent from the night's ordeal. "Come on, buddy," Ethan murmured, scratching behind his ears. "Let's get you inside and warmed up. You've earned a rest." Max let out a soft sigh, and for the first time that night, he finally let himself relax. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a blanket of fresh snow that covered the Montana wilderness. The rescue mission was over, but the impact of what had happened that night was just beginning to unfold. Ethan sat on the front porch of the Carter family's cabin, a hot cup of coffee in his hands. His muscles ached from the night's ordeal, but it was a good kind of exhaustion, the kind that came from knowing they had made it back alive. Beside him, Max lay curled up on a thick blanket, finally getting the rest he deserved. His fur was still damp from the snow, but his body was warm now, and for the first time in hours, he looked completely at ease. Inside the cabin, the Carter family was gathered around Liam, who had been discharged from the hospital that morning. The boy was still weak, but he was awake, alert, and, most importantly, safe. Sarah stepped out onto the porch, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. She gave Ethan a soft, grateful smile before looking down at Max. "We owe him everything," she whispered. Ethan nodded, glancing at his loyal partner. "Yeah. He never gave up. Not for a second." Just then, the sound of tires crunching over the snow caught their attention. A small convoy of news vans and local reporters was making its way up the driveway. Ethan sighed. "Guess the word's gotten out." Sarah smiled. "Of course it has. Everyone in town is talking about him. He's a hero." By the afternoon, a small crowd had gathered outside the local fire station, where the sheriff had set up an impromptu ceremony to honor Max. The town's mayor, rescue officers, and members of the community all came together, eager to show their appreciation. Max, now fully rested, sat proudly beside Ethan, his ears perked, watching the people around him with calm curiosity. He didn't understand the attention, but he sat patiently, as always, by his handler's side. The mayor stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Tonight, we gather to recognize an extraordinary act of bravery. Our search and rescue teams are incredible, but sometimes, it takes something even more special to beat the odds. Last night, a young boy was saved from the storm, not just by our officers, but by this incredible dog." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Max's tail thumped against the ground, his eyes fixed on Ethan, as if waiting for his next command. Ethan crouched beside him, ruffling his fur. "That's for you, buddy." Then, the sheriff stepped forward, holding a medal attached to a thick blue ribbon. He knelt in front of Max, looping it gently around his neck. "Max, for your courage, intelligence, and unwavering dedication to saving lives, we honor you today as a hero of this town." The crowd cheered louder, people clapping and whistling. Even Liam, bundled in his mother's arms, clapped excitedly, his face lighting up with joy. Max, sensing the excitement, let out a short, happy bark, his tail wagging faster. Ethan laughed. "Yeah, you deserve it, pal." A reporter stepped forward. "Officer Blake, do you have anything to say about your partner here?" Ethan looked at Max, then at the crowd. "Max isn't just a dog. He's a lifesaver. He's my partner, and last night, he reminded all of us just how incredible these animals are. If it weren't for him, Liam wouldn't be here today. We all owe him our thanks." The applause swelled once more. Liam wriggled free from his mother's arms, running forward to hug Max. The dog nuzzled against the boy, his gentle nature shining through. Sarah wiped away a tear, watching the moment unfold. "He's more than a hero, Ethan. He's family." Ethan nodded. "Yeah. He always has been." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the snow-covered town, Max lay beside Ethan, his tail still wagging as the town celebrated the dog who never gave up.